Welcome, ISE students, to this town hall where we will give a little bit of an update about NC State, the plans for the coming weeks and months as we know them right now. And I know that some of you will also be viewing this remotely later, but for those who are here now in real time, please feel free to use the chat box to put additional questions or comments, and we'll take them at a couple of points in the presentation. Now, let me say up front that I do not have all of the answers, and there are many things that are either still unknown or that are continuing to change as there is new science or new guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention or new guidance from the university system. So the things I'm going to tell you today are those as we know them on May 28th, 2020, and we will update you as we learn more. And thanks to all of you who submitted questions in advance. We'll try to answer the majority of those questions as we go through some of this background material and then address some additional questions at the end. I'd also like to point out, so I'm Julie Swann, department head. We also have Dr. Kanton Reynolds, director of undergraduate programs, joining us. And I see several faculty are on the line in addition to our ISE student ambassadors. And I'll provide you the names of those student ambassadors at the end of the presentation. And you are encouraged to reach out to any, either the faculty, myself and Dr. Reynolds, or the student ambassadors if you have questions that you didn't get answered today. So this is the topics that I am going to cover today, and I'll warn you, there's a lot of text on these slides because I want to be sure that you have the slides as a resource. We won't go over every single detail on every single slide, but you will see that there's a lot of information on there. And whenever possible, I've tried to pull directly from the materials that the campus has distributed because those are the most accurate that we have. Now, just a little bit of background on COVID-19 to be sure that we're all on the same page. The virus that causes COVID-19 is called SARS-CoV-2. It is a virus in the coronavirus family. There are a variety of different symptoms, and they have continued to add to these symptoms over time. So for example, diarrhea was not listed as one of the original symptoms. Loss of smell was not originally listed, but that has been added to the list. The mortality is about 5 to 10 times that of influenza, and there are some specific risks. So advancing age, and that generally the number cited is 60 years old and over, plus several different kinds of conditions that either compromise immunity or affect the vascular system, for example. And there are greater risks of, there is a higher mortality rate in some specific communities right now, such as African Americans. In America, it's not fully understood, and it does not seem to be completely explained by the other factors that we know so far. So there may be additional risks that have not been identified yet. But if you'll notice, age generally puts most of the college population, the young adults, at lower risk for severe outcomes from COVID-19. However, you can still carry the disease, and there are many around you who may be at greater risk, even if you yourself are not at greater risk. So remember, a campus community includes faculty and staff and the community in the Raleigh area as well. Transmission, this virus is more infectious than the typical influenza virus and that we see yearly, but it is less infectious than measles. The transmission occurs, they think, primarily airborne, both large and small droplets that are often occurring in close contact. There is a potential route of contamination through the fecal pathway, such as when someone has had diarrhea and there may be particles left on a hand, or possibly in the air. We don't know about that. And there's also a potential contamination route through touching of surfaces, although that does seem to be smaller. The majority of the infections are occurring really in close contact where someone might be speaking with someone or spending significant time with someone. What is also important about this particular virus is that there are a number of people who carry the virus and have it, but are not symptomatic. In general, the number I've heard is 40 to 50% of cases, but among college-age adults, I expect that that figure is a good bit higher. So this means even if you don't know that you have COVID-19, you might be spreading it to your classmates, some of whom might be at greater risk, and you may also be spreading it to faculty and staff. So that's one reason that even though your particular risk might be lower, we want to be careful overall because it's a larger community. I would encourage you, if you have any interest or want to check the facts, look at any of the other resources that I'm providing. So here I have a link to the CDC website, for example. There was a recent post by a faculty member in the Dartmouth area, and a picture from it is over here on the right. And he really did a great job of talking about the risk and really thinking about the risk. And he talked about the risk of infection as being related to exposure to the virus, as well as the amount of time you're in that setting. And the exposure here includes the number of people, the closeness between people, even the activities that you're doing. So singing in a choir has a greater risk than talking, for example, as well as the airflow between you. So that's one reason that people generally say that being outside tends to be lower risk than being inside, for example. And here's a picture of a restaurant showing in this slide where the first case is where the X is, and the other cases are marked in red with dates on them. And you can see that it's spread to other people in the restaurant at that table of the infected person, but it also spread to those other tables nearby, likely reflecting some of that airborne transmission and the airflow in that facility. So to reduce transmission, we physically distance from people. We wear face coverings, which help reduce that air transmission, particularly from me to you if I were to cough or sneeze or have large droplets come out of my mouth. We also make sure to clean surfaces as well as other things. There are other strategies that are also possible that are being done throughout the country and in other places. So testing, there's two kinds of testing. There's testing for infections and there's testing for antibodies. And then testing is often paired with contact tracing. So if someone identified that I had the disease, then we look at my household members and people with whom I've been in close contact and try to make sure that those people can be tested or that they isolate until we make sure that they're not spreading it to others. If you have had a sufficient percentage of your population acquire the disease, then you may reach herd immunity where the virus has difficulty sustaining itself in the population. But this doesn't occur until you have about 60 to 80% of the population who have immunity for this level of virus with this infectivity. So we're not anywhere close to that in North Carolina. My estimates are that we're below 10% in North Carolina. New York, New Jersey, it may be a different story, but we're still pretty low here in North Carolina. Of course, there are new treatments being introduced every day, and there are experiments ongoing with vaccines. And so we certainly look forward to the day when there are more of those available. This Friday, that is tomorrow at 11 a.m., we have a disease modeling seminar. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about how disease models are built and how we test out different interventions with an engineering framework. Now let's come back to NC State and bring some of these things back together. The Chancellor sent an email a few days ago. He has named 10 task forces that are working on plans for NC State, are working on plans to be successful in the fall. And you can see here those task forces I've listed for you on this page, and there are many different ones. I am a participant in the academic calendar committee, so I can tell you a little bit more about that one. And that one has moved pretty quickly on the planning since it's so crucial across all aspects of planning for the fall semester. And there are others that I don't know quite as much about their plans right now, but over the coming weeks, those plans will go online. Each one of these committees has been asked to come up with some preliminary planning documents by June 1 and have a final plan approved by early July. This is more content that came from the Chancellor's email, but I want to talk about a couple of the things that are in here. As you know, the academic calendar is going to start on August 10th. One of the reasons for that is really for the safety and health of our campus community. What we know is that when people go from one place and they travel outside and interact with different people, they have a risk of acquiring a virus while they're in that other location. And then if they come back to that first location, they can bring that virus back with them. We see this every year for influenza. After the Thanksgiving holidays, after the winter Christmas break holidays, when people are going from one place to another and interacting with different populations and perhaps going through airports and things like this. So both NC State and a number of other universities have made the decision to start earlier so that we can have students release by Thanksgiving and be able to return to their permanent residences. And this will both protect the campus and the Raleigh community area, as well as reduce transmissions really throughout the country as many universities move to these plans. So this means that our final exams, they are put into that calendar. They will be in person at this moment. And right now, the announcement did not contain any information about a university winter commencement plan. As it mentions, it talks about an early start. It mentions a possible second wave. There are a couple of different kinds of waves of disease that people are talking about when they talk about a second wave. One is because we've now changed our distancing policies, so I would anticipate that we'll start seeing an increase in cases currently. And another reason is that if a virus changes its transmission patterns during the summer when there's different weather and people are outside more and things like that, that it may be circulating at lower levels, but then reoccur in the late fall or early winter. And, as I mentioned, that is a typical time period for influenza. And it's thought that our response will be to COVID-19 will be even more difficult during that time period when they are both circulating in full force. This calendar also does a couple of other things. It reduces the breaks both for students and faculty. So it removes the Labor Day break and it removes the fall break. I know that this is difficult. I know that many of you will be disappointed and you will be missing that potential mental health break. This is done with the safety of the campus community in mind, and I can tell you that faculty will also, and staff will also be struggling through it with you. All of the faculty are aware of these changes in the academic calendar. I'm not going to say that they're going to change their assignments because I think that that we don't fully know, and that's not my decision to make. But what I will say is that we are emphasizing to faculty to make sure that we think about the additional stress that students are under, and that the change in calendar also has other implications for students. So we are encouraging our faculty to think about that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the coming slides. There are potential scenarios where right now everything we're planning to have campus fully open with all categories of students here. Of course, anything can happen over the coming months, and we just, we're in a monumental event right now that you may never see again in your lifetime. Let's all hope so. But we don't know what would happen. So there are also contingency plans built in. If we did feel like for safety reasons we needed to send folks back to their residences after they've gotten here. I, of course, hope that that's not the case, but there are contingencies both for that and for other things, like if there's a hurricane that causes some change in classes for a short period of time. So here are some of the topics that this campus committee about the academic calendar is considering. We are not done with all of these decisions by any means, but this will give you a sense of some of the planning that is ongoing with the group. As you've seen, the calendar is one piece of it. You've seen the draft of the calendar for fall, or at least the start date, and the draft is coming. We're also looking at the calendar for spring as well, again, trying to both take into account the health and safety of the community, as well as learning outcomes and making sure students get what they need to be successful for their degree and their career, and for a university to meet the ABET requirements and other accreditation requirements, both for individual courses and for the whole degree program. Right now, we're going through a process where we're looking at which classes are prioritized for being in person and which would be okay if they were delivered online. We're looking from the standpoint of the content and the pedagogy on what would match best there. And so departments are putting in their preferences, and then the scheduling group will be working on coming up with a new class schedule that accounts for that. Along with determining which classes will be prioritized for in-person versus online or hybrid, the group is also looking at things such as the timing of classes throughout the day and the length of classes. So one of the things that we think about is the potential transmission in a classroom, but also when classrooms are changing, you know, when you're moving from one class to another. And if you've ever been in Daniel's Hall, you know, it's just lots of people lined up at once. So we are trying to make some more space between classes so that transition time is a little bit easier. And we're also looking at the specific assignments of which class in which room. In some cases, you may find that bigger classes may be more likely to go online. It's not completely true, but that may be one way to think about it. But then that also gives the opportunity for a different class to be moved into a bigger space. We're even looking at whether we should rent additional spaces for classes for this fall to enable distancing in classes. So we're looking at those locations. The university is investing in technology to support classroom infrastructure and to support the faculty who are being asked to move their content online. So we are installing extra cameras in classrooms. We're making sure that faculty have document cameras. And if you remember from the spring, we also had a way for students to get access to a device if they didn't have one already. We're also looking at other spaces that are related to academic instruction, so halls and stairwells and doors. And, you know, just like you have in many of the places in the community, you may find some changes where maybe one door becomes an entry door and another door is an exit door, or there may be markings to indicate spacing. So, you know, throughout the whole country, many different institutions are looking at things like that. I mentioned contingency planning. The group is also talking about the use of personal protection equipment and other, I call it hardware here, but for example, plexiglass might help give a little bit more of a barrier to the airflow between yourself and a customer service person, just like you have right now at grocery stores and coffee shops. So we are looking at some of those things in our academic spaces and throughout our departments. And then we're also starting to talk about the grading policies. So, you know, this semester you saw that there was the allowance for taking classes pass-fail, and there was a later drop date. There's not been a final announcement on any of these policies, but what I can say is that the committee is thinking about students and trying to provide some additional flexibility to students. But because we know a lot of things in advance, we may find that the dates for doing this may be a little bit different for the fall than they were for the spring. But we'll find out as these policies are continued to be developed. But I can assure you that you know, what students need is certainly at the forefront of our considerations as we also think about our requirements like we have for ABET or other programs. The provost sent an email to faculty asking that each instructor prepare a contingency plan for fall 2020. And the provost mentioned a number of things that these plans should think about, including how, if a student is on quarantine, then how they can access the class and make sure that they're still participating. What happens if an instructor is on quarantine? What happens if we have a change in county or state policies? internet reliability, all kinds of different things that instructors were asked to think about. There is a specific template for a plan that asks faculty to look at communication, distribution of materials, delivery of lectures, all kinds of different activities. And what I've been reminding my students, my instructors, is that either students or faculty could need to be absent for a period of time related to COVID-19. And so that we need to account for that in our plans. And so if I were instructor, I can tell you what my preference would be. I like to deliver classes synchronously when possible so that people can engage and ask questions, but I would record that class, whether it was given in a classroom in Daniels or given in another format, and allow students who needed to access it, I would allow them to access it. So that's how I would go about it. But I can assure you that we're looking at these things. Instructors have been asked to send their contingency plans to the departments by July 31st. And what we did last time is that we read through them and talked with specific instructors if we felt like there might be a hole that they needed to close. Sometimes we put instructors in touch with each other to share best practices. So there are a number of different things that we do with these as we prepare for the classes for fall. We've also had some learning sessions with our instructors from this semester where they talked about some of the different strategies they use and the things that they liked or the things that they didn't like that they would move to for the future. Of course, it was unprecedented to have virtually every class in the university go online in a 2-week time period. I want to thank the students for your patience during that time frame, and I also want to give a shout out to the faculty and staff who made it happen. During that time, there were a lot of faculty who also had children at home because the public schools had been closed, but yet they found ways to deliver material for you in the classroom. I don't promise it was perfect. We have many things to learn from in this process. But I do anticipate that there will be a number of things that will be better in the fall as we have time to prepare for our in-person classes, as well as better strategies for those classes that will have online content. So some people have asked about some specifics about COVID-19 operations on campus and what some policies will be. I put a few resources here that have turned up in the last week. I particularly liked the second one on the list, sharing different things that different colleges are doing. And this is something where we might be able to find a way to share access to it, but I suspect you could get it through our library, if not other ways. The CDC has also recently come out with some guidance for colleges, and so we'll be looking through that carefully. So there have been some questions about whether students were being asked to wear face coverings, and it's not just students, it's faculty and staff. As a department, we have asked our staff whenever they're in common areas that they should wear a face covering. And I am expecting that our faculty will do the same. The university, we've gotten mixed feedback on whether we're legally allowed to require masks or not. It depends on which group you ask. So I'm not going to comment on whether it's going to be required or not, but I would ask you to think about the following. When you wear a mask, it's to protect the others around you, and you yourself may not be at greater risk. I think I'm not at greater risk of having severe outcomes from COVID-19. But every time I go out in public in a common space, I have a mask with me and I wear it. If I pick up food from a restaurant, I wear it. If I go into a grocery store, I wear it. Mine happens to be pretty. You can see it. But you know, there are all kinds of different ones. My kids have ones that have different kinds of faces on them. So I would encourage you to be creative. What's most important is stopping that airflow between you and the person next to you. There are other things that are being looked at across campus. The architect's office and the facilities office is going around to all of the different buildings on campus. They're looking at the HVAC system, they're looking at that airflow, they're looking at the size of spaces and the layout so that they can determine how many people it would be safe to have in a particular room. We're looking at our common lounges, our cleaning practices. We're looking at the transportation policies, like using the bus and how many people could be on the bus simultaneously. So there are really many different things that are being considered simultaneously by these different committees. So I don't have the answers to all of the questions about them, but I can tell you that it's on the list. And anytime that I see an idea or a policy or something, I make a note of it, and then I give that information to the corresponding people around the university so that they can consider that. So there are a number of decisions that have not been determined yet. So I'll give you some examples for those where the discussion has just begun, but there are some other colleges that may have put out their policies. So we don't yet know whether we'll have a specific policy around testing for infections or testing for antibodies. As you may know, the testing for infections is one flag that can determine if you have an active infection that can be spread to others. It's not a perfect test, but it's pretty good if that swab is really used well and it goes way back in the back of your nose. Pretty uncomfortable, I think. Testing for antibodies can show if you have some evidence in your bloodstream that you have developed antibodies in response to the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And it is likely some measure of immunity, although it's not known exactly. The testing for infections right now is more reliable than the testing for antibodies, but there are new tests being developed every day. And as more accurate tests are being developed, they can be better used and integrated into a community. What is known in public health is that anytime you have a disease outbreak, that if you can effectively test for infections and do contact tracing of the closest people to that infection, then you can be successful at stopping that outbreak or epidemic. And this is the kind of approach that was used in South Korea and Germany and some other places. And over time, I think that there are more and more communities in the United States moving to that model with contact tracing. There are also other ways of doing screening. So you can have a self-reporting of your symptoms that day, including temperature, cough, or other kinds of things. There's a hospital in the Boston area that's had a lot of success doing this. You know, before someone walks in the door, they do a short screening, a few survey questions every single day, and they have reduced their transmission in the workplace to almost zero during COVID-19. And that's really a success story that can be looked at. So we don't yet know the answers to these for NC State, but we've got scientists and student experts and others thinking about all of these things and making sure that we're doing what's right for this campus and this community. I now want to address some of the specific questions that came up in the Q&A in the ones that you submitted in advance. So someone asked if they couldn't arrive to campus by August 10th, what would happen? I am asking all of my instructors to make sure that there's a contingency plan for class that should address options. I would think that this would be true across most of the university. We certainly recognize that students have had plans, whether it's an internship or a trip with your family, or you had not planned for housing by August 10th. And so we recognize that this change in calendar has implications. And so we are asking our instructors to provide options if students have a good reason for not being able to be here on August 10th. Classes will be a mix of in-person, online, and hybrid. And there are all kinds of different strategies that are outlined in that article showing some of the different the things that different colleges are trying. So for example, some colleges may be having half of the students to a class come on Tuesdays and the other half come on Thursdays, and the other students are joining remotely. One advantage of something like that is that it does reduce distancing, but it still allows for some direct interaction during that class period. So students in the class might be able to ask questions, which then other students could benefit from in that interaction. So everything is on the table right now in terms of different kinds of classes. You can, in hybrid, so you could have a class that has a lecture, but also has a lab component. The lab component might be in person, and the lecture might be online. If the capacity on a course were to change, then changes would be handled on a case-by-case basis. At the moment, we're not being told that any of the capacities on the course itself would change, but we'll certainly look at that if that does happen, and we'll help you solve your problems in that area. If you are absent from class because you are sick or quarantined, then instructors are being asked to have a policy that would allow you to continue in the class. Now, if you are absent because you wanted to go to the beach, I'm not promising that the instructor will have a way for you to necessarily do that with no penalty. But if you have a reasonable reason that's connected to COVID-19 for being absent, then I absolutely expect our instructors to have something to allow you to continue. And instructors do know that you have fewer breaks, and so they will be thinking about that while also making sure that that we're addressing our requirements for a degree program. So someone had asked, would freshmen have all online courses because they may have larger courses? In the scheduling of courses, I know that the committee has been talking about making sure to balance in-person classes and online classes across the curriculum. So I'm anticipating that students at every level would have some kind of online course, but would also have some kind of in-person course. The locations of the courses have not been changed yet, but I do anticipate that they will be changed. So right now, I wouldn't put much time into thinking about those locations. We'll have to wait until it is determined how many seats can be used in each classroom around campus, which courses are going to be prioritized for in-person, and then new location decisions will be made. Now, some of you wrote to us about Fitzwillard Hall. Fitzwillard Hall will not be open to the community on August 10th. The ISE department is not moving in before August 10th. We don't have occupation of the building on that day. We will have occupation of that building later during the semester. So it is possible that the lab classes could even change partway through the semester, but that is not known at this time. We'll certainly know more closer to time. Someone asked about graduation. As I mentioned, the university has not announced their plans yet. ISE will follow any guidance from the university, but I will tell you that we did do a virtual celebration in the spring that does not replace the physical graduation ceremony because students will still be invited back at a later time. But we did try to find a way to give some credit to the students and allow them to celebrate with their parents and family. And this has been viewed pretty widely, both live when it was released and afterwards on YouTube. You can go to our webpage if you'd like to see it. Graduate students had asked about whether they could defer an admission 2 semesters in a row. That is possible. A couple of other points there for graduate students that I'll leave for my other town hall. I mentioned that we will be delayed coming into Fitzwillard Hall, where even the department and the faculty don't right now know what that plan is. We think that it's going to be staggered, where there may be research labs moved, not all at one time, but more gradually over the semester, and that for the most part, classes will stay where they are assigned to start on August 10th, with the possible exception of the manufacturing lab, which we'll determine closer to time. If we have any international students in our group today, there are some specifics that may be relevant to you. I would encourage you to check the website from OIS, and I know OIS had a webinar recently for international students. So far, the rules around internships remain the same. OIS will work with students if there are any changes needed to I-20 documents. If international students were to join online, they'd be paying tuition just like everybody else. And if you're being paid by the university, then you're generally expected to be on campus. We also have our student ambassadors as a resource, either today or later. So we'll take some time for questions in the coming minutes. So get your questions ready and submit them by chat. But then we also have a number of these ambassadors, including our ongoing ambassadors, as well as some of our new ambassadors. We have them on our call today so that they can stay on after the faculty get off in case you have some questions to ask them that you don't want to ask the faculty. And at this time, I will take any additional questions that you might have. So I would encourage you to first consider submitting those by chat. And if you're not able to submit those by chat, then we can find a way for you to raise your hand as well. Okay, and I do see one question over chat. I'm going to see if it's one that I can answer in real time or not. And this is a question that I think Dr. Reynolds will need to answer. I don't think that I have the answer on my own, so I'm going to forward that to him and see that. Let's see. Okay, and now we have another chat that's come in as well, another question. Has there been any discussion about the protocol of group projects? Great question. I think it was one that came up earlier today in some conversation that I was having. I'm thinking about senior design. I'm thinking about if there are lab groups, those kinds of things. I would say that group projects can be beneficial. You can learn from each other, and teams are often used in companies. The more different people you're interacting closely with, slight risk of transmission increases every time you're adding people to that list. But certainly there are ways for people to work together. So for example, I had a meeting with another person. I was sitting more than 6 feet apart. I wore my mask for the meeting. And so I think that there was very little risk of any transmission occurring in that environment. I can tell you for the spring, senior design is a really important course, and I was working with a team on senior design. The team, of course, moved to their individual residences when the move to the campus came, but we continued to operate as a team. They continued to meet on their own, and then we met as a group as well. So I think that we are going to continue to see some group projects for some of the classes, but they may change in nature sometimes, where some of that work you could be doing remotely, or you may want to take your own distancing policies and put them in effect. Okay, and here's another question. Know anything about the status of libraries and other study spaces being available in this semester? That is a great question. I will have to look into that. I don't currently know something, but I will bring that up to the committee and make sure that someone is thinking about that and has a good answer for that. There's a question about an official IB transcript. I'm going to let Dr. Reynolds answer that one in a moment. So I'm not sure about the answer to that one. There's another question about professors create groups based on what precautions the individuals are taking. That is certainly possible. A lot of groups are self-formed, and so that may be something that you may want to think about when you're forming your group. If you're someone who's very risk averse and always wearing a face covering, you may want to choose to participate in a group where others have a similar mentality. Sometimes some people are living together in an apartment or fraternity house, and those people are already in close contact for other reasons. Some of those may choose to work together. Dr. Reynolds, do you want to take either of the questions to you, the ones that have come in? I think the IB question is one that you should answer. No, not right now. Okay. All right. We'll have to get that answer. Okay. So here's another.
I'm sorry, I was on mute.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, the question about IB transcripts goes to admissions. We don't deal with transcripts. Not in that way. We only deal with transcripts when it comes from a student that has taken a class at another university that's been pre-approved or has transferred into the university. If you're coming from, your IB transcript is coming from high school, then that's with admissions and registration of records. We don't deal with that at all.
Okay, all right. Dr. Reynolds, did you see the other question that I pasted to you about a student concerned about curriculum changes? Do you want to take that one? Or you want to take a look at it and take it in a few minutes?
I need to take a look at it.
Okay, great. There's another question at the end here. Will fall courses be adjusted since spring 2020 classes did not incorporate the full experience? For example, moving on to ISE 316 without getting any of the 3D printing experience from 216. What I would say is throughout the whole country, we have students who didn't spend as much time in one class as they might have otherwise. I'll give you an example. I've got a kid who's going from elementary school to middle school, and they have not had as much deep mathematics at the end of the year as they would have had otherwise. I can assure you that those next grades are thinking about that. For the ISE 216, 316 series, our professors are certainly aware of that, and I think we even have one on the town hall today. And so they will make sure that you have what you need from 315 and 316 to be successful in the course. Do international students get a choice to defer their admission to spring 21 or fall 21? If yes, what is the deadline to confirm deferral? My understanding is that deferral is done one semester at a time. So you can make a request to defer now to start in January 2021, but the option of deferring until fall 2021, I think would be later in time. I will double check that with our director of graduate programs, and we'll make sure that we have, that I've given the correct answer when we get to our graduate student town hall tomorrow. Thank you for that question. Other questions to come in, and I'll give a couple of minutes for things to come through. When will students get an advisor appointed? Dr. Reynolds, would you like to take that one?
So it depends on when you were admitted into the department. If you're admitted into the department as an EFY, engineering first year, IEI, industrial engineering intended, then you'll get an advisor, an IE advisor from the first moment that you come to campus. If you're admitted into EFY, engineering first year, and it's not with a designation, so not IEI, then you will get an advisor from the college. So that will be Haley Queen or Miles Robinson or Mary Claire Robbins or somebody else that works in the staff portion of academic affairs at the college level. When you matriculate into, when you go through the COTA process and matriculate into the industrial engineering department, then you are assigned one of three advisors, myself or Mrs. Blue or Mr. Lowe, just depending on how many students enter the department at that time. We have a predetermined ratio between the three of us on how many students each person gets. So that's typically how advisors are assigned.
And I think some of the students and advisors are matched based on particular experiences sometimes, right? Right, Dr. Reynolds, you know, if it's a transfer student or you know, I don't know, other kinds of things, they may be matched with a particular advisor.
In some cases, yes. Like, for example, if we have a student that's coming from the 2+2 program at UNC Wilmington, then I typically keep those students. Or any external transfers coming from a different university, I tend to keep those students So if we have students coming from exploratory studies, then Mrs. Blue tends to get those students. So there are some other nuances that come with it, but by and large, it's really just randomly required for, I see the question, randomly acquired, it's randomly assigned, sorry, to the advisors. Yes, that's the answer to that question.
You mean about the quota and the requirements?
Yeah, about choosing an advisor and getting an advisor appointed.
Oh, okay. I meant to send the next question to you, Kanton. I ended up.
Yeah, I can answer the next question. Yeah, so it is required, and I see the email, or not email, the link that was sent to the university regulations, and you know, that's a selective reading of the regulations. It says when new requirements or significant changes are made to a degree program, a new effective date is created for those students entering the program, the degree program, under the new requirements. So the changes that were made to our degree program were not deemed to be significant changes or new requirements. We did not add any new content, right? We split a current class, which was ISE 498, into 2 different classes, but we did not change any of it. It's still the same. That was not deemed by the University Courses and Curriculum Council as a significant change. We also changed prerequisites for some of the classes, but we have a mechanism to ensure that no student is disenfranchised such that they can't complete their time to graduation in the same time frame, right? So again, that was not deemed to be a significant change. A significant change is one that involves restructuring the degree such that you would either add a course that was not already there that has some significant new content, or you are doing so in a way that could prevent a student from graduating in a timely fashion, right? These courses, these changes for the degree program were all taken to the University Courses and Curriculum Council, which is a multifunctional organization. It crosses all of the colleges at the university, and it was reviewed at that level and by the Associate Dean for University College, Brett Smith, and they were all deemed not to be significant changes. That's why you're being required to adhere to those, right? So this went through the entire process from beginning to end that the university uses to acknowledge whether or not a change or requirement is new or significant enough to merit consideration under this this particular part of the courses, curriculum, and academic standards policies, right? So that was not deemed to be the case, and that's why you're being required to adhere to these new changes. Any student that has brought an issue to me that has had a problem meeting these changes, we've figured out a way to make it work for them such that they are not impacted in time toward graduation, right? And that's the key point. We cannot impact your time to graduation, right? Now, if this, you know, makes you take a class and a sequence you didn't want to take it in, that's not an acceptable reason, right? It has to be, we are creating a situation where you have to come an additional semester, right? That's the only real caveat in terms of whether or not it's a significant change. If we're requiring you to attend a university an additional semester, right, then that would prevent us from being able to implement these changes. If we have ways to work around that, then that's not an acceptable reason not to implement the change or to adhere to the change. So if there's somebody that has an issue that I'm not aware of, then please bring that to me and I'll work with you to figure out how we make these changes work for you. But these changes were all vetted through the University Courses and Curriculum Council and approved by a cross-functional group of professors and deans at the university.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Reynolds. And as a reminder, people may not have realized, so when the senior design course was split and a 1 credit hour course was created, that did not add to the credit hours for the degree, because we had taken a credit hour from, I believe it was the 352 course with its lab that was an extra credit hour, and we incorporated those labs directly into the course and reduced the credit hours for that course. So the credit hour replaced between those two courses, and the content of the senior design course was split so that you can really use the class time for your projects and your presentations and your meetings with the clients.
And that's actually a very good point that I forgot to bring up. To your point, the degree requires 124 credit hours. We have neither decreased nor increased the number of credit hours. It's still 124, and that would have been another trigger to make it a significant change, as if we increased or decreased the credit hours. We did not do that.
Okay, we've got another question here. Are international students recommended to attend the new student orientation along with the international student orientation? If yes, then how can I register, as I don't get an option from my Wolfpack account? I've got an ambassador who says that they can answer an international question. Nikki, is this one that you can answer?
Hi, yes. So I used to work in the Office of International Services, so I'm happy to answer this question. These two orientations are very different orientations, and you are required to go to both of them. The new student orientation is going to help you get ready for classes, understand what the university requires and different things that you are going to see during your experience at NC State. The international student orientation, you are required to go under the U.S. government law. And these are the things that are going to help you get your visa verified and any other information, and also understand what life is like as an international student on campus and what other requirements you may have to complete in order to continue your education here. So it's really important that you sign up to both of them. If things continue to be the same throughout, like as it was as I went through with my new student orientation, you should have gotten an email in order to sign up.
And if for some reason you have not gotten information about registering for the new student orientation, is there, which appropriate resource should the student turn to find the information?
I can't remember the name of the website, but if you look up New Student Orientation NC State, the first link should be able to direct you to the instructions for signing up.
Great, thank you very much, Nikki, Ambassador Nikki Grell. We'll make sure that we have that link available. We'll pause and see if we have more questions. There's a question, will there be, and maybe, I know that Dr. Ivy is not on the list, but Dr. Mayorga is, and Dr. Reynolds may be able to help. Will there be any exceptions for those students choosing to do a 2-semester senior design, such as the health systems? And I think that that is referring to the lean 1-hour course, Dr. Reynolds.
So I'm not exactly sure I understand the question 100%. I think what they're asking is, do they have to take ISE 520 and ISE 398? And the answer is yes, you have to take both of them. In terms of how exceptions would be made, that's something I have to talk to Dr. Ivy about, because I need to understand how she plans to implement that content into 520, ISE 520, ISE 521. My understanding from her when we talked a while ago was that it was going to be concurrent with ISE 520, but I would need to follow up with her to be sure, assuming that that's the question that student's asking.
Yeah, I think it is. And of course, we also have the entrepreneurship senior design. Right. And my understanding is that all of them are asked to take this lean course. By the way, the lean course does give you one of the belts in the Lean Six Sigma system. Is that correct, Dr. Reynolds?
Yeah, so we're using the ASQ certification system, and we're using the Green Belt book for that purpose. We actually had a discussion with one of our partners, Tyndall, one of our industry partners, and they are, they're pushing more and more of their employees to have that certification. They're seeing competitive schools like LSU and Mississippi State and Virginia Tech, who they all hire from, send their students out with one of those certifications. And so, you know, this is an effort on our part to better distinguish our students in a earlier fashion so that they have the opportunity to use those skills quicker in a industry scenario.
Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. Yes, it was in response to the feedback about recruitment. If there are not any other questions for Dr. Reynolds and I'm going to ask that, that we leave the town hall along with the other faculty, and that students are invited to stay on the line and ask additional questions to the student ambassadors. I'm going to stop my screen share. And Karen, if Walton, if you can, as a staff member, stay on to make sure that the operation continues. Thank you, ambassadors, for coming today, and thank you for continuing to interact with the students throughout all of this. Okay, thank you for joining us today, and you know, we'll try to have another one of these later. You know, I do not promise that we have all the answers yet, but we are working on making sure that we can make this a meaningful educational experience for you, while also protecting the health of yourself and others. Thank you, and of course, go Wolfpack.
Okay, waiting for one more. Hey everybody, if y'all want to turn on video, you're welcome to. So I'm not just looking at little names on my screen. I can come out of the dark now. Hi, I'm Karen Walton. I'm Dr. Swann's executive assistant. So I help her with coordinating these kinds of things, as well as her calendar. And I work with alumni and the advisory board, and I do all kinds of stuff. Please feel free to, you can chat amongst yourselves. You can ask me questions. I'm just going to stay here just to make sure this thing doesn't crash. And that it stays going. So speak away. You can turn your mics back on, you can come off mute so you can talk freely.
I also added, putting in the chat now, this is a email that you can email any of the ambassadors if you have a question that you don't want everybody to see. And just the ambassadors will see it, and we'll be able to get a response back to you.
Are y'all excited?
Yeah.
No.
I've gotten used to working from home. I'm like, I don't want to go back to campus now. I mean, I do, but I don't.
I'm not ready to not have any breaks.
I know. Well, I don't give breaks anyway, so it's no different for me. So
I just use them to catch up on my work, but
yeah.
We'll find a way.
Yep.
Lots of discipline this semester.
So yeah.
Actually, I do have to pop out. I took this was my lunch break, so I'm headed back to work.
Ah.
Good luck, everybody else.
Okay, that means somebody else has to talk.
Hey, Karen.
Hello, Spencer. I know Spencer will talk.
Put me on the spot here.
I know. Well, let's see. You were supposed to be at Disney. You are not.
Well, supposed to be there in the fall. It's still not.
Oh, that's right, in the fall.
It's still not confirmed. So just hanging out.
Okie doke. I know. Is everybody having a good summer otherwise?
It's good. It's good.
It's not like we can do a whole lot fun.
Some classes.
Oh, you're doing summer classes?
Yes.
Oh, poor you.
It's a tragedy, honestly.
Well, My husband is a lecturer in civil engineering, and he's teaching 2 summer classes this first session. So,
Oh, wait, I'm in his class. I just realized that.
uh-oh.
That's yesterday went great.
You must be in statics.
Yes, I'm in that in TFQ right now. It's quite the time.
Yes.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
so.
That's crazy. I didn't.
Yeah, it happens a lot.
I don't know why I didn't put that together because like Walton. Well, now we know.
Yes. There have been many students when we're on campus that see our names like all the time, and it takes them months to figure out that we're related.
Well, I remember on the first day he was talking about he had a wife in ISE. I was like, huh. Still took until right now for me to realize it. That's okay.
That's okay. I don't know anything about statics, so don't ask me.
No, I'm about there with you. Just kidding. I'm learning so much. It's a great time.
Somebody,
Go ahead.
oh, sorry. Somebody just asked about summer research. I don't know much about summer research, but I know I've been getting a lot of emails from the research department that they've still been doing like trainings and stuff. So I think they're still doing research in the virtual environment. And within like the ISE department, I know like Dr. Ivy, like she'll sponsor REUs and stuff, which is kind of like research program that happens like all across the United States. So there are some that happen on the NC State campus, and a lot of times it's like once you develop the relationship with the professor, you can like join their research teams if you're interested in their research and reach out to them.
That is correct. The research, when the university shut down and everybody went home, all the research went home with it.
Yeah.
Just actually starting today, the labs are starting to open back up again, but only about 25% of the research on campus is coming back during this first phase. There has been other research that's continued to go on if it has to do with data analytics or it's something that can be done not in a lab. Those that require lab space have just come back this week. So it's slowly getting there. The plan is to have all labs, physical labs, back operational before you guys show up. But a lot of the summer research work for undergraduates and even for graduate students is done. People are selected back in the spring semester. So, but it is, a lot of it's through the REU program. Anything else? Any other questions? So what are y'all doing exciting this summer?
Working.
Working.
Yeah. Luckily, my internship just got pushed back and not canceled. So.
My internship got pushed back as well, so I start on Monday.
Very good.
I was supposed to be out of the country right now, so. But I'm in my bedroom.
I was supposed to be in the office packing to go to Fitzwillard Hall. In addition to my normal job.
I was gonna go to London with Dr. Reynolds, but
Yeah, didn't happen.
okay. Now I'm taking statics.
Oh boy.
Same thing as London, right? You know?
Well, I think London would be more fun.
See some birds in person instead.
At least it'll be done and out of the way.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Done and out of the way.
Someone asked how's our current situation in the US because they live in India.
They're still rising here. I try not to watch the news very much because it makes me very depressed. So they are still rising here, but
It's very location dependent.
it is. It's very location dependent. I was trying to think of those. It is very location dependent. It's even location dependent on within a state.
Yeah.
So it's not just within the country, but also within every state. It's location dependent. Depends on the concentration of the population.
And everything's kind of just like trial and error.
It is, and I think a lot of our numbers are going up, possibly due to our number of testing going up. Because they're testing more, they're going to find more positives. And I think people are more apt to, it's like now with any little cough or whatever, they're going to get tested because it's you know, so you're going to get more positives from that. I was going to cut Dr. Starley off, but it won't let me. He's just kind of hanging out. I know, I'm like, okay. Any other questions? Spencer, you've got to have questions. You always have questions. I pick on Spencer because he used to work for me.
None of my questions can really be answered.
They can't.
Just mainly want to know where I'm going to be in the fall.
Yeah, I can't answer that.
Yeah.
I did see that they're reopening though in July.
July 11th. There's plenty of work for IE to do with capacity stuff, but it's just a matter if they want to bring us all in.
Yep. So did y'all happen to see the article that we had? I believe it was either 4 or 5 ISE alumni that said why it was good to be an IE during difficult times.
Oh, I saw you sent that.
If you didn't read it, you should. It's interesting. I am not an IE. I have a degree in accounting. But I am a Wolfpacker. Okay. I guess if nobody else has any questions.
Nice meeting everyone. Be safe.
Bye.
If we do get back to campus, please come by Daniel's 400 and say hello,
Okay.
because that's where I'll be. You, except for you. We hope you're not there. Spencer, you can't be there. We hope you're not there.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.